Friends, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me, and we're starting. I'm used to sitting in the dark. Over the years, I have spent many hours in dark places, dark rooms, alleys, dimly lit bars, using a soft night robe to hide my presence. The curtains on the windows were drawn, blocking out the city lights, just as the height of the building blocked out the noise from the street. I blocked the switch by the door so that the light didn't come on when he came in, forcing him to cross the room to turn on the light by the couch. At first, he angrily flipped the switch up and down several times, but the switch stubbornly continued to resist his efforts. He didn't see me in the leather club chair opposite the couch until he turned away from the lamp. "Who the hell are you?" He growled at me. I slowly lifted the gun from my lap and pointed it at him. "Sit down, Mr. Hall," I said. "We need to talk." The gun wasn't pointed directly at him. It wasn't threatening yet, but it was hinting. It was an old Walter PP, pre-war, 7.65 caliber. Yes, it did not have the killing power of a 45 or even a 9mm caliber. It was a more accurate tool, but just like a scalpel in the hands of an experienced practitioner, it could be just as deadly. And I was nothing but a highly qualified specialist. He was small, but I wasn't a big man, and he fit well in my arms. I realized early on that it wasn't the strength, but the location of the injury, and I was an expert at that. He had slung his coat over one arm, and now hung it on the arm of the sofa before sinking down on the sofa facing me. "I'm giving you 30 seconds to leave before I call the police." I made an open gesture with my left hand, palm up, inviting him to call. "Be kind." He pounded on his phone for several minutes before finally throwing it away in disgust. With my left hand, I took out a small device about the size of a cigarette pack from my left pocket and held it up. A phone signal jammer. It disables all cell phone transmissions within a 500-meter radius. It also works with surveillance cameras. I assure you, no one saw me enter this hotel or this room. We are completely alone. I put the device back in my pocket. "I don't think you know who I am, but I have a lot of friends in this city. I am quite a rich and influential person. I'm not someone you want to see as your enemy." I looked at him for a moment, long enough for him to see my eyes. "When you have killed as often as I have, without the slightest remorse as I am, you are used to killing as much as I am. You can see it in your eyes. But then again, my eyes have always been like that. Even as children, adults didn't want to look at them, seeing their own death staring back at them, somehow realizing that they were looking at death incarnate. But the passing years have not softened this view, but only strengthened it. As I said, I'm a man of average height, at least compared to those who are bigger and more intimidating. But I've noticed that when I look someone in the eye, they often leave as quickly as possible. Even those I work with tend to avoid me and prefer to communicate when possible in a public place. It's not that I've ever felt remorse for killing in public rather than in private, but very few people want to be alone with me. Only my Tracy seemed to suspect nothing and often danced where the angels were afraid to step. Alexander Richard Hall, 52, senior partner at Adams, Jennings, Hall, and Bryan. He specializes in medical malpractice, a fairly lucrative branch of the legal profession, criminal law, and more recently, political fundraising. The net worth exceeds $63 million. He is married to the former Denise Adams and has 2 children. Son David, who is currently studying law at Harvard, his father's alma mater, and daughter Jennifer at Johns Hopkins University. The main residence is in Darien, Connecticut, plus you leave this suite at the hotel for the duration of your stay in the city. You also use it, let's say, for other dates that you would prefer to keep secret from your family. I think that covers about everything. He was nervous looking at me, and then my calm presentation of the facts unsettled him even more. As my experience with all influential people has shown, people who are used to getting their way and being rude to others, when faced with an alarming situation, he resorted to bragging. "What do you need here? I keep only minimal funds at home. If you're looking for money, there's not a lot of it here." I looked into his eyes again. I wanted him to fully experience what he was facing, to know fear before he felt pain, to see his death before he felt it. "No, Mr. Hall, I don't want your money. I'm here to kill you." It shocked him, but not enough. I could see that the calm presentation of his fate bothered him more than if I had beaten and physically abused him. He leaned forward in his chair as if he wanted to get up from it, and in response, the gun trembled slightly so that it was pointed directly at his stomach. "Sit back in your chair, Mr. Hall. Unless you want to speed things up." He leaned back, and I could see him looking at me, trying to take stock, figure out the situation he was in. I usually try to fit into the setting, whether it's a street brothel or a boardroom. So for this upscale hotel, I chose a nice Brooks Brothers suit made to measure from Italian fabric, a white shirt, and wingtips. I think it was difficult for him to come to terms with the fact that such a modestly dressed man would calmly shoot him. "I do not know how much you are being paid, but I will double the amount. Or triple it. Name your price and I'll pay. Or anything else you want, and if I can get it, it's yours. I know a lot of people, influential people who can give you almost anything you want. Just tell me what I can do." "I don't need your money, Mr. Hall. I have more than enough for my own needs. I am a simple person, and my needs are simple too. It's not that my needs bother you. But there's one thing you can do for me, Mr. Hall, and if you can do it, I'll let you live." He looked like he was on firmer ground now. There was a chance, a negotiation, and he was a master negotiator. "Just name it," he said a little impatiently, "and I'll take care of it." I looked at him. I looked him straight in the eye, and he realized that his own death was staring him in the face. "Can you not use my wife, Mr. Hall? If you can undo the love that you had in this very room, and return it to me untouched, clean, unblemished by your hands, if you can turn back time and return it to me as pure as it was when you met, I will let you live. Can you do this for me, Mr. Hall?" He just stared at me. His face was white. "Who are you?" "Tracy Evans' husband. I'm sure you remember Tracy. You used it in this room, on the couch you're sitting on right now. I know you've had a few women here lately, but you probably remember her. 32 years old, blonde, a figure you could die for, and will soon die for. You see, Mr. Hall, it belonged to me, the only pure thing in this world, and you have stained it. You took from me what was mine. You took from me my angel, and now you're going to pay for it. I didn't know she was married. I wouldn't have touched her if I had known. Come on, Mr. Hall. Are you really going to die with a lie on your lips? How many married women have you seduced here in this room? How many people have you put in your bed? But maybe it will refresh your memory." With my left hand, I pulled the recorder out of my shirt pocket and, holding it, pressed the play button. A fragment of the conversation began, apparently recorded in a bar or restaurant. "So why aren't you married, Tracy? I would have thought that an attractive woman like you would have been taken a long time ago." It was obviously the voice of Alexander Hall. "Actually, I'm married. We just don't advertise this fact. My husband works in some kind of security field, and he thinks it might be dangerous for others to know who I'm married to. I think he's worried that they'll use me to get to him and I'll end up getting hurt. It sounds very mysterious, so how far will you go to continue pretending to be single? I mean, you have an open marriage, you're dating, or just for show. There is nothing better than an open marriage. I've kept my maiden name. I don't wear wedding rings, and from time to time I go to events with friends, have dinner, or drink in a public place like this, but that's it. John is a bit old-fashioned, definitely the possessive type, and I know he would kill any man who went too far with me." I turned off the recorder and put it back in my pocket. The gun never left Mr. Hollis's stomach for a second. I looked at him again. I was shot several times, once in the stomach, once in the left shoulder. The closest I could come to describing the pain I felt when I heard you and Tracy making love like animals on the tape in this room was when I was shot in the stomach. This is one of the most painful wounds known to man, as you will soon feel. "Please wait," he said when I shot him twice in the stomach. The silenced pistol made little noise, more of a puff than a pop, just a whisper of quiet death. 7.65 is a small cartridge, subsonic and not very powerful. He put his hand on the wound, and then, lifting it up, stared at the blood on his fingers as if he didn't believe it. We sat there. He was bleeding, and I watched him slowly die. We have time. None of the wounds are immediately life-threatening, but the pain will be severe. And over time, it will grow and become overwhelming. You lawyers have the phrase deliberate malice, which means the intention to commit a crime. Tracy warned you that she was married and that I would kill you, and you still deliberately used her. You thought you were above my anger. Currently, your stomach feels like it's on fire, but it's going to get worse. As the evening progresses, the pain will get worse until you do something to end it. I once spent 2 days in the jungle with such a bullet in my stomach and stayed alive. You won't survive. I looked at my watch. The time was approaching 1 o'clock in the morning. I have about 6 hours before I have to leave. Until then, we can enjoy our time together. I leaned back in my chair to watch him suffer. At one point, he tried to get up, but a shot shattered his left kneecap and put an end to it, leaving him lying on the floor. It was just before 4 a.m. when it became unbearable for him. At that moment, he was in shock, delirious, regained consciousness, then lost it, but he was getting louder. So I put 2 bullets in his brain, into the base of the skull from behind, at an upward angle. I swept the room to make sure there was no evidence left, collected 5 empty cartridges, and turned on the silencer again at 7 o'clock. Then I left, mingling with other businessmen and travelers, muffling the security cameras that silently tried to watch me leave. I needed to talk to Tracy. Sometimes it is said that you have only one true love in this world, and if that is the case, then my only true love is death. It wasn't the relationship I chose, but rather that death chose me. To this day, I do not know why she singled me out as her favorite, someone whom she decided to embrace as a lover and not as a victim, but she did it. It was also, like many relationships, one-sided in the sense that she took everything from me and left little in return. Yes, I was her favorite, her lover, and in exchange for loving me, she allowed me to use my power to cause death to others, but at the cost of my humanity. And she was a jealous lover, which I didn't understand at the time, but I found out later in life because she didn't accept rivals for her love. Our relationship began before I was born. In fact, a few weeks before my mother died clinically in the emergency room from illegal substances. Somehow they kept her body alive. Her brain was dead. For 15 days on a ventilator, pumping it with nutrients, antibiotics, and who knows what else to give my body a little more time to develop. In 1980, medicine was not as developed as it is today. Even then, I realized it was easy and simple, and I spent the first 3 months of my life in the hospital. I didn't have a home to go to. My mother was an unknown teenage idiot who was picked up near death in a back alley, and my father is also unknown. But death embraced me and decided to let me live the way I lived. I do not know if it was because of the chemical that was pumped into me, or because I lived for 2 weeks tied with an umbilical cord to a dead person, but from that moment on I became a pet of death, and besides, who would want to adopt a premature baby receiving illegal substances, with eyes so dark blue that at times it seemed like I didn't have an iris? Even at this stage of my life, adults looked at me warily in the eyes. After the hospital, I grew up in several foster homes, some of which were better than others. Despite the difficulties associated with my birth, my body has grown mostly to a normal size, not too big, but not too small either. Apart from my eyes, which sometimes appeared dark blue and sometimes black, there was little that distinguished me from my fellows, except for a bizarrely increased body strength, which was not obvious until I demonstrated it, and what I later defined as a complete lack of emotion and empathy. From what I've read, I've learned that I'm technically a psychopath because I don't experience any of the emotions that others experience. But I am a unique psychopath in the sense that I have no reason to hate, harm, or hurt my fellow human beings. I feel no love, no hate, no sadness, no joy, no elation, no depression. Death loved me in her own way, but all I could give her back was obedience. I couldn't love death and I didn't want to, and the only time I really felt love, death destroyed my love. As expected, I had no friends at school, but no enemies either. A series of schools based on which house I was in at the time passed before my eyes. I was smart enough, but I didn't see much need to prove it, being content with passing grades. Sometimes, especially at the new school, I was challenged, but my strength combined with a complete lack of fear led to fights that were usually short and often bloody. Yes, sometimes I lost, especially in the minority, but I won more, and even after losing, the winners paid a price that they had no desire to repeat. I never sought revenge, but from the very beginning I realized that the brutal and rapid suppression of my opponent was an object lesson that no one wanted to repeat. I existed in my foster families without forming any attachments, without developing any feelings for paid guardians who provided me with housing and food. The psychiatrists, who were provided by the state and who insisted on examining me, found nothing wrong with me, claiming that I was completely sane, which is even alarming. There was no neurosis, anxiety, psychotic behavior, in short, nothing they could point to except the lack of demonstrated emotions, which they simply ignored when they determined that I was harmless. They assumed that my emotions were locked inside and never noticed or cared that I just didn't have them. And I didn't enlighten them. I realized my obligations to those who cared for me and met them with the obedience and respect their actions deserved, at the level they deserved, but did not create a lasting relationship. They appeared and disappeared from my life in an endless stream of faces. I was often transferred, but not because of any actions on my part, but because my very presence caused concern. 3 days after graduating from high school, I was on my way to boot camp. I joined the service in high school before graduating and saw no reason to delay. I didn't ask for a specialty or make a deal. My goal was to become a combat Marine. There was no war, but I knew it would come somewhere. Unlike at school, my goal in the Corps was to succeed, and I succeeded in hand-to-hand combat, in armed combat, in conventional and unconventional warfare, in everything. I learned how to parachute, went to sniper school, spent time with explosives. With my physical strength and inner discipline, I excelled in hand-to-hand combat. I've never been angry, worried, or afraid. I felt neither sympathy for my opponent nor rage towards him. If he defeated me, I learned from it without the need to take revenge. I did not feel resentment, since I did not have pride that needed to be calmed. If I won, which happened often, I didn't have to humiliate my opponent, so I just defeated him in the most efficient way with minimal effort. The fact that others took it as a sign of my maturity or benevolence would have amused me if I had felt amused. I really learned to laugh, trying to cover up my emotional disadvantage, but for some reason it only scared others. I had been there for 3 years when 9/11 struck, and a week later I was alone, on horseback, deep in Afghanistan, near the border with Pakistan. I specialized in solo missions, working alone, without a partner or team. It wasn't something the Corps liked, but there were times when it was required, and when it was necessary, they often turned to me. I worked for 4 years and spent them in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Kuwait, and Iraq. Then 4 more years, when the Corps loaned me to the CIA, and I moved from the Middle East to South America. Wherever they needed to kill someone, I was there. Wherever I went, death was with me, hugged me, protected me, loved me. She didn't need me to kill for her. She had so many ways to kill without me, but she seemed to take special pleasure in killing me. Even for death, the death of a million people was satiation, so she focused on the individual murders that I committed. When faced with a crowded buffet or an overabundance of sensations, it is often better to focus on just 1 or 2 dishes so that the taste buds are not suppressed. Too many sensations dull the senses, and too many experiences suppress the ability to process them. Death has learned to enjoy my murders, to bask in their warmth, to take pleasure in an act that left me insensitive and cold. I was the only dish on the menu she chose to eat, the one she chose before the menu was written. After 12 years, I've had enough, and I'm tired of it. My contact at the company seemed surprised when I told him that I would not top up my account. He suggested that I take a break for a few months, but he misunderstood. I'm not tired of killing. I'm just tired of killing for minimum wage. I wanted to consult with only one client. He immediately saw the benefits to the company, which included that I was not a Marine, so they could use me in jobs that were not officially approved by the Marines, plus that I was not on a government salary, so they had a plausible rebuttal of something that I did. It would become public knowledge. Besides, I could now do the homework that I was previously forbidden to do. I founded a consulting company registered in another country, which existed only to launder payments to other bank accounts in other countries. I was the only employee. My needs were simple. Having no desire to have a home or family, I lived from hotel to hotel, acquiring property and throwing it away as needed at each job. I had no personality of my own. I had no possessions. I had no personality, but I developed each personality according to the requirements of the assignment until I gave it up for the next one. I may have been a psychopath, but to the company I was their psychopath, to whom they could point their enemies. I didn't kill for fun or pleasure, but only for profit, and I lived by the code of good and evil that I developed myself. Love was a commodity for me, bringing neither emotional nor spiritual satisfaction, but simply a form of physical liberation that I found useful. Strangely enough, I found that my almost complete indifference to the love and physical attraction of women acts on many of them as a kind of aphrodisiac. I wasn't attracted to men, I was sure of that, but I didn't find one girl more desirable than another, except in the most general terms. I wanted them just for love release and, to my surprise, I found that many were attracted to the cold, clinical style of love that I provided. My only lover was death. She held me in her arms. She jealously guarded my communication with women and would not tolerate any breach in this wall. But she let me flirt, as long as there were no obligations. She fed on the fear I caused in others, not the pleasure I gave to a few. I accepted an assignment in New York to eliminate a socialist professor from a South American country who was in self-imposed exile because of the new government. He came to raise money among the darlings of the academic community to return home and cause even more trouble, and it took some time to organize my work, since it was supposed to be a flawless accident. It was on this assignment that I met Tracy. She was a minor player in the political campaign of a local politician who was soon to take office. I met Tracy at a cocktail party, which was organized as a meet and greet for a visiting professor, and immediately felt attracted to her. Yes, I felt it. For the first time in my life, I felt love for another human being. Emotions were as alien to me as my world would be to her if I honestly told her about it. But I knew that from now on she had to be a part of my life. I wanted to possess her, own her, protect her, keep her, love, and cherish her. We define the word stormy romance by the fact that within a month I married her, having arranged with an acquaintance in the company for a federal judge to conduct the ceremony in secret. Although I wanted and needed her, my assignments kept me away from her, except on the rare occasions when I could spend time with her. Shortly after the wedding, I gave up my current assignment and was immediately sent to South America for another job. After that, I traveled around Iraq to get rid of the tribal leader who was causing us trouble, and then returned home to Tracy for a week's vacation. I took her to Baltimore for the weekend to eat crab cakes and visit the Inner Harbor. On the second night, 3 robbers accosted us during a night walk, and the careless efficiency with which I dealt with them seemed to terrify her. Unarmed, I killed 3 men in about 10 seconds and then took her away from the scene, leaving their twisted bodies to be searched by the police. The next morning we left early and drove back to New York, but she was sitting quietly in the car some distance away from me, thinking. I didn't like that she was sitting apart from me, and I slowly took her back into my arms after we returned to her apartment. This determined the pattern of our lives for the next few years. I would spend a few days, a week, or even 2 in New York with her, and then return to the assignment for a month or 3. I'm not sure if she liked this lifestyle, but we never discussed it. I made it clear about my feelings for her. She was the only one I loved, and that was how our life was supposed to be, and she accepted it. Complaining, at least to me, was not in her nature, and I'm sure she would have told me if she was unhappy. She was still the only one who could look me in the eye, although I noticed that she did it less often over time, as if something she saw there bothered her. But for my part, the time I spent with her, no matter how limited it was the only time I experienced true happiness in my life. Her house was the only place where I could relax, feel free, be myself, and not the person I put on every job, even though I wasn't really there anymore. So, with her, I played the role of a loving husband, pretending that it was the real me. I casually told her that I would kill any man who touched her because she had awakened another emotion in me, jealousy, which was alien to me. Of course, I kept her under surveillance when I wasn't at home, if only for her own safety. I've killed too often, for too long, not to make enemies who could attack me through her. My employers arranged this, just another advantage of the job, even though it allowed them to filter what was provided to me. It's not that I suspected Tracy of cheating on me. She loved me too much for that, but I just wanted to protect her. Was I blinded by my love for her? Did I mistake her growing fear of me for love and devotion, her willingness to satisfy any whim of mine when I was with her, for a sign of affection, and not for a growing innate horror of who I was and who she was married to? Perhaps it was, but who or what instilled this fear in her? It wasn't me. Neither by word nor deed did I harm or threaten her in any way. I showed her nothing but loving kindness, gentleness, and grace when I was with her. It was my old mistress, Death, who raised her vindictive head, sowed seeds of doubt in my angel, which forced her to seek protection elsewhere, protection from her loving husband, instead of relying on his protection and only on him. I was in Beirut when I received the tapes from the company, the tapes that destroyed my world. For the company, Tracy became a burden. It was one conversation that decided her fate. But they couldn't act against her without arousing my enmity, and unlike Tracy, they had enough respect for my abilities. I immediately returned, unregistered, as cargo on a military cargo plane. Using one of my many aliases, I took some clothes out of storage and rented a room to rest and change. Then I took the train into town and spent the evening with my wife's lover, Mr. Hall, before returning to Tracy's apartment. She left for work, so I rested again until she returned. I had another piece of conversation that I hadn't played back for Mr. Hall on my dictaphone, and that I intended to play back only for Tracy. I listened to it again. He's a monster. He's not human. I once saw him kill 3 people and walk away like he was throwing garbage in a trash can. He has no feelings, no remorse, no emotions. And those eyes of his, when he looks at me, I get so scared. He's trying to show love, but what comes out is something unearthly. Nothing can hurt you, Tracy. I can protect you if necessary. We can file an injunction to keep him away from you, even provide you with some protection. If, as you say, he killed 3 people, we can put him in jail for a long time, where he can't hurt anyone else. I have a lot of contacts in the local police. You don't know him the way I do. You don't know what he's capable of. You've never met him. You've never seen him. He's just pretending to be a human being, trying to imitate him, but he's not. I do not know who he works for or what he does. He just says that the company hires him and he leaves for a few months. He has scars on his body, from bullets or knives. I do not know. When he touches me, my skin crawls. You're shaking. Come sit on the couch with me and let me hug you. I couldn't listen to the end. He seduced her, defiled her, stained and defiled her body. But by that time, she had already turned her back on me. He paid not for seducing her mind, not for turning her against me, but for corrupting her body. Tracy will pay for her betrayal too. She came home and pretended to be glad to see me, but I knew it was an act. We had dinner, walked late, just holding hands and talking, 2 lovers in the city. We both played our roles, lovers, and returned to her apartment. I found that I couldn't stand up to her. I loved her too much to hurt her. We made love, and I held her in my arms while she fell asleep. I pressed the injection pinned to the top of her neck, where the hair should have covered the injection mark. The poison was fast-acting and reflected a brain aneurysm. It may take several days before she is found, and the poison will quickly leave the body. I was needed in Lebanon and left the same night.